What scared you when you were a kid, huh? Was it ghosts? Was it dark closets? Was it clowns? When you're a child with little knowledge of the world, it's hard to make sense of the implausible. When your parents tell you about Santa Claus, chances are you won't ask how a morbidly obese man slides down your chimney in order to break into your house and give you presents for no reason. And when you see some type of media that scares you as a kid, chances are it'll stick with you and psychologically haunt you for the rest of your life. Have fun with that. For myself, the piece of media that scared me the most also happened to be my favorite show as a child. Ladies and gentlemales, may I present to you Thomas the Tank Engine. Thomas the Tank Engine is a children's TV show about an island of anthropomorphic trains that do nothing but work all day. Everything is run by this guy who looks like a slave owner. Well, I guess he kind of is a slave owner. The books were originally written in the 1940s by a reverend named Wilbert Awdry. The Thomas TV show is my absolute favorite show as a young child. The show used miniatures and had a pretty well-rounded cast of characters that you could buy at Toys R Us. And it was also narrated as if it were a storybook. I still own a few VHS tapes from back in the day. My favorite being the collection known as Spills and Chills. We haven't even gotten started yet, and already we're getting foreshadowing. The US version was voiced by Alec Baldwin himself. Now what makes this tape so special? That's because this collection of episodes scared me more than anything else I grew up with. Who would have thought that a show about trains with faces would be scary? So the first episode on this tape is Tobys Discovery. This episode starts off pretty lighthearted as Toby, who is our protagonist for this episode, takes her Topham Hatt and his grandchildren to the beach.
Soon the children were playing in the sand, building a splendid castle. Sir Topham Hatt inspected it. My word, it's a very fine castle.
Actually, that's a nuclear plant. And why does Sir Topham Hatt need to inspect the castle? What's gonna happen to the children if the sandcastle isn't fine? Please don't send us back to the orphanage, Sir Topham Hatt. Then Sir Topham Hatt's grandchildren show him a map that leads to the actual castle on the island.
Pondered Sir Topham Hatt. Come along, we are going exploring.
Holy crap, Toby's tripping out! So they head out in search of the castle. That's when they find out that there's an old abandoned mine in the area. They first visit the castle and then immediately head to the mines. They don't even go inside the castle. They're just like, oh, that's a nice castle. Boop.
Once upon a time, the mine had been worked by the little engines, and their lines were still in place. Sir Topham Hatt was most impressed, but Toby was rather scared. He was glad when it was time to go home.
Can you blame Toby? I mean, not only is the set unsettling, but it actually contains the faceless, rotting corpses of other trains, who I can only assume probably worked themselves to death. Still believe this guy ain't a slave owner? Then, upon heading back to his shed, he finds out that he has to go again, and is somewhat distraught by this information.
I think the castle in the mine will make a fine place for visitors.
Yes, remember that place? With dead corpses, you're going back. And of course, the very next morning, his plans are put into action.
I'm sure this place is haunted, he thought. It's our turn to stay here on guard tonight, Toby.
Hey, f*** you, Toby, you got the night shift.
Beware of the ghost, Toby, Thomas said. What ghost? Asked Toby. The old warrior ghost. Every night he lights his fire, then goes hunting. Toot toot, goodbye.
What the shit, Thomas? Can't Toby catch a break in this episode? This is the first time we see the main character on this tape, and he's being a rumplestump. Later, we see Toby and his engineers, and of course, they just go to town with the fog machine on this one. Hey, anything to hide the rust-decaying corpses, am I right? Fog machines, get used to them.
Quite suddenly, he heard a strange wheezing sound. It's the ghost, he wailed. What ghost, his driver asked.
The ghosts? What you talking about, George? So, as Toby is losing his shit, insisting that there's a ghost about, his engineers go off to check the source of the noise, and come back shortly after.
The old warrior wants to meet you, laughed his fireman. Can't it wait till morning? Replied Toby. Ghosts don't work day shifts.
Okay, so it turns out it was just an old-ass engine. I guess when the mine closed, they just left him there and forgot about him. Somehow the ghost story was a little less depressing. Well, I learned nothing. Why is it called Tobys Discovery? He didn't discover shit. Everyone else already knew about him. Okay, so looking back, this episode wasn't all that scary. Compared to the rest on this tape, you thought this was enough to scare me for life? We're not even getting started yet! So the next episode is titled Rusty and the Boulder. In this episode, workers on the island decide to build a quarry next to a small rocky hill that has a perfectly circular boulder right above it. And a small diesel engine by the name of Rusty is tasked with delivering rocks to the construction site, who even points out that the boulder is a potential hazard along with some other concerns.
This mountain rock is good for many things, although it's dangerous up there. Why? Asked Thomas. Because of a big boulder. I think it's watching me.
Well, alright then. Then a new marketable character shows up in order to help with the mining efforts.
It's called Thumper. Apparently it helps collect the rock faster, replied Edvard.
What kind of career did you have before you were brought onto the crew? I'm killing me. Later that night, all of the workers head home while it rains, but for some reason, Rusty and his driver are still there. Oh, and so is Thumper. They just threw a blanket over him and left.
Suddenly, a large slab of rock landed on the rails. Rusty was shocked. We'd best leave till the weather's better. The rain loosened some of this rock.
Who thought this was a good idea? To further the unsettling build-up to this episode, they give the boulder a creepy-ass ghost face. It's like the man in the moon got a case of the seasonal depression. In fact, I don't think it's a rock at all. I think it's a coconut.
Coconut.
So the next day, the mining finally causes the boulder to budge, and Rusty's driver continues to ignore the danger until it's too late.
Don't be so daft. It can't. It's rolling along our line.
So Rusty and his driver outrun the boulder and take refuge on a downhill track?
We'll stop here until Boulder passes by. But Boulder was nowhere to be seen. Then, oh no, it's behind us.
How is this physically possible? The way the boulder inexplicably comes from behind him. It's like the boulder is intentionally trying to murder the main character. As if it's taking the main role as antagonist. Get it? Role? Fortunately, Rusty and his driver come across a line twitch and are able to escape certain death. Then the boulder continues rolling down the tracks as it picks up speed, nearly killing two other characters and smashing things in its way. Until the boulder finally reaches the yard.
Oh no, heading straight for me.
So upon realizing this was the worst idea in history, they moved the boulder to another hill for some reason. And according to Rusty, the boulder now lives the rest of its life in deep regret. One of the most memorable episodes I've seen, just because of how much it terrified me. Throughout the episode, the boulder is just sitting at the top of the hill, as we are constantly reminded of its increasingly ominous presence until it runs amok on the tracks. The idea of an inanimate object coming from behind you to take your life is something that stuck with me for years. Maybe they meant for this setup to be silly and absurd, but just ended up being intense and traumatizing. Plus, the way that the boulder towers over all the main characters not only makes it feel like an actual dangerous object that poses a real life-threatening situation, but as an actual character that's trying to kill you. It doesn't help that they address it as Boulder, as if it has a cognitive role in this episode.
I think it's Boulder wanting us to go away.
Watching this episode as an adult may be silly and implausible, but nonetheless terrifying. Next we have the episode titled Duncan Get Spooked. The main character for this episode is named Duncan. He's Scottish and he's always smug and grumpy.
Well, now what do you think of that?
So Duncan, along with some other smaller engines, work to clear the tracks of leaves and branches. The freight cars, however, who are always attempting to cause some form of mischief, break loose from the engine that was carrying them. And as a result, they fall into a ravine from a tall bridge. Somehow, how did that happen? Of course, collisions and accidents are an ordinary antic on the show. No one ever dies or gets hurt. It's made for kids. After taking responsibility for the accident, Sir Topham Hatt shows up and lectures the engines.
You will work in the yards until I can trust you again.
Excuse me, but aren't these trains always working? That's literally all they do. And why is he taking the blame? The show clearly establishes that these characters can't do jack without the drivers. Aren't they the ones responsible for whatever happens?
Duncan was delighted with Peter Sam's dilemma.
What an asshole.
Fancy not securing your freight cars on a hill. They'll come back to spook you and your special funnel.
Wait, what? So there are 6 actual corpses at the bottom of the ravine that are currently acknowledged as dead? And the cast of the episode does seem to accept it. Yeah, business as usual.
Woo!
Okay, you know what? Never mind. I'm pretty sure this character is off as rocker. So Rusty speaks up in Peter Sam's defense.
And who's to say you're not afraid of ghosts? Snapped Rusty.
Things that go bump in the night? Rubbish!
Rusty proceeds by telling him a ghost story.
A long time ago, a little engine was returning home. It was a misty, moonlit night.
Wait. How come no one's driving it? I think we already have a ghost in this story.
Suddenly, the engine lost control and plunged over the side into the swamps below. He was never found again. But many a workman will tell you that when the moon is full, they have seen the little engine trying to get home. But he never reaches the other side. So what do you think of that, Duncan?
Okay, there's no doubt in my mind this was specifically made for scaring children. I don't even know where to start. The dim lighting, the heavy fog, the pacing, the fact that we never see the train's face, everything about the scene terrified me. Plus the fact that this unnamed character never made it to the end of the bridge is as depressing as it is frightening. So of course he brushes this off, claiming to be a skeptic, and steams off. Get it? Because he's a steam engine?
Boo!
This gives the drivers an idea. After a discussion with Duncan's engineers, they agree to play a trick on him.
We'll do it tonight.
So Duncan works for the rest of the day, and once you know it, he can't stop thinking about the ghost story. They finally set their plan into motion by intentionally taking on an extra task in order to stall till nightfall, which further agitates Duncan. So far so good. This is the kind of idea that would make the Grinch green with envy. Then finally at nightfall, they cross the old bridge, and things start to get spoopy.
Then, ahead, he saw flickering lights. His driver knew they were only insects that shine brightly at night, but to Duncan they looked like an engine. Next, his driver secretly threw a rock from the cab into the ravine below.
It's the ghost! Take me back! Take me back, please!
Hello, this is the Soto Psychiatry Department. How can we help you?
Then Duncan finally arrives back home. He shuts himself in his shed, left to deal with his life-scarring trauma. At the end of the episode, we see exactly what the main character sees, and it blurs the line between what's actually happening in Duncan's imagination. Despite knowing it was a prank, this episode was still terrifying for me. Plus, the ghost story itself is the scariest part. It's dark, depressing, and unsettling to say the least. I mean, maybe the ghost was already there. I mean, how did those accidents happen in the first place? I think it was ghosts! Why is death an actual plot device in this episode? Thomas the Tank Engine scaring the poop out of your small children! Ugh. Okay, we're about halfway done with these. And that concludes part 1. I'll bring in part 2 when I finish boiling the toiling. The trend of childhood trauma was started by a channel called YMS, so be sure to check out the series of videos that started all this. Super special thanks to Dominique Seward, Channell Hunt, Patrick Campbell, Delta 5, Aqua, SnackBird, and our Patreon supporter, Chuunibruh. Thank you everyone for helping me make this video possible. Bye.